And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
I've given, plenty of testable falsifiable predictions. I've given you confirmed predictions based on the catastrophic plate tectonics model. He's given no actual evidence for universal common descent. He's gone to rescue devices to explain away the accumulating damage. I've already debunked that based on the fact that the genetic noise is just too much to look to any type of rescue device. And synergistic epistasis, as he talked about in his rebuttal there, the thing is, to the extent, there is substantial amount of synergistic epistasis happening, it actually makes the genetic situation worse, not better. And very, very extensive numerical simulation experiments has actually falsified the synergistic epistasis mechanism. But I have to applaud him for actually bringing up some arguments and some rescue devices for genome-wide degradation based on low impact deleterious mutations, because everyone else that I've debated, they really came unprepared, and there's no way to resolve the problem, and it's a lot of imagining and just so stories, but at least he tried, which is nice. But evolutionists, like I said, they hope, they dream, they imagine that, dogs and pine trees are related through common ancestry, but the thing is, it's just not true. It falls in the realm of pseudoscience. And even when there is very strong synergistic epistasis, it fails to curb deleterious mutation accumulation. Instead, what it does is it causes accelerated genetic degeneration and rapid extinction. But what's to be taken from this is that these primary escape mechanisms, synergistic epistasis, for example, mutation count mechanism, even the back mutations he just talked about, they're exceedingly rare. And even when they do happen, based on the amount of deleterious mutations that are flooding the genome and being transmitted from generation to generation, it's as if there's no back mutations at all. But at least he tried, unlike most of the other evolutionists, so that's nice. But these primary escape mechanisms used by evolutionists, they're artificial, contrived, and are profoundly unrealistic biologically. So the majority of beneficial mutations, they're going to escape positive selection, and the few rare beneficials will then have high impact. But these isolated high impact beneficials will only allow for adaptive episodes. And these rare anomalies happen even while the rest of the genome is undergoing systematic degeneration. So I've already presented a ton of examples for genetic entropy in real time. And I've demonstrated that natural selection is constrained hugely by selection interference, because selecting for one trait interferes with selecting for another trait. And when you have billions of traits segregating in the population, then the selection process starts to work against itself. And that means you end up with being able to only select the best and the worst mutations, as I've been talking about the entire time. I feel it's as if evolutionists just don't even listen, because anybody should be able to easily see that most mutations fall within this no selection zone, and that almost all of them are deleterious. But all evidence becomes evidence for pond scum to people evolution. But the fact is, even with strong, generous selection, if you wanted to give that to them, this entire no selection zone only undergoes complete degeneration. So it's funny, because Taylor speaks of the obvious, right? Natural selection, adaptation, few beneficial mutations, but anybody with a basic understanding of genetics understands and knows these things. So the argument of genetic entropy only begins after acknowledging these obvious things, and his rescue device mechanisms, they're not going to account for the relentless influx of deleterious mutations.
All these paradoxes go away if we simply accept that the genome is degenerating, which is painfully obvious. Okay, so do people argue against this? They do, but it's kind of like straw men that they're dealing with. Of course, the idea that if it's almost all junk, then the mutation rate isn't nearly so high. If we could get mutation down to 1 or 2 or 3 mutations, well, 3 is over the top, isn't it? So you need to get down to 1 or 2% of the genome is functional, or genetic degeneration is certain. Some people have formulated a kind of far-fetched hypothesis called the mutation, I call it the mutation count mechanism, where they say, well, as mutations accumulate, Mother Nature somehow counts the number of mutations per person, and then selection is against the people who have high mutation. The people who have accumulated more mutations are selected away. We've done simulations of that, and we have basically disproven it. You can look it up as under the link I gave you. You can read that paper, but it's really clear that that hypothesis is not biologically realistic, doesn't work. The second explanation is something called synergistic epistasis mechanism, and again, we've proven that it doesn't work. The idea is if you have lots of mutations that are deleterious, as they accumulate, they amplify each other's deleterious effect. The intensity of degeneration is so great that somehow it improves selection. It's just the opposite of the way it works. And that somehow that helps. All of our simulations show that if we introduce synergistic epistasis, it degenerates much faster, which is what logic would demand, and populations go extinct quickly. All 3 of these really have been falsified.
I feel it's as if evolutionists just don't even listen.
I feel it's as if evolutionists just don't even listen.